Everybody, it's the new year and it's time for you to learn a new skill. We are going to do a deep dive into D5 render. I've got a mini course here, exteriors and interiors, all free in about an hour. I'm going to show you exactly what you need to do to get started so you can create stunning images like this. So let's get started. We are going to be doing the Glass House by Philip Johnson. It's a beautiful, iconic project. It has beautiful terrain, materials, and it's a great way for us to get familiar with the tools of D5. That way we can apply everything we learn here to our own projects. So link is in the description for this beautiful SketchUp model that we've modeled from scratch, just for you. Again, all for free. So to get started, let's go to our D5 render launcher. If this is your first time ever opening up the launcher, I recommend you going over to the workflow tab and just downloading any plugins for the software that you use. You know, there's a fantastic SketchUp Live Sync plugin, which basically connects SketchUp to D5 render. So any updates I make go automatically to D5. I don't need to manually upload the model. But for this, you don't need to worry about this because I'm supplying the model for you. You can do a direct import, but pointing out that this is there. Anyways, we're gonna hit new and we're gonna get started. Once it opens up, we can X out of this. And I'm going to talk briefly about what we're looking at here, right? So on the left here, we've got our scenes list. Think of this as bookmarks of different areas in your project. It's a way for you to save cameras and settings. So watch this. If I hit add scene and I move my camera and I click this, it'll bring me there. That's how you can save different hotspots. Here, layer system, so you can be organized. You can have a layer for architecture, a layer for trees, and I'll be talking about how to do this. The object outliner, so any object that lives in your scene will live right here. So terrain exists here, right? I can turn it on and off because it's in my outliner. I also have my import container, so when we import the model, we'll actually see it here, and we'll do that in just a moment. Then over here we have our inspector tab. This is for all of our environment settings, right? Time of day, and all of our post-processing settings like exposure, color correction, all that is going to live there. Okay, turn on auto again, and this is our giant viewport. To move around, there's a couple different ways. Personally, I recommend going right over here and switching to fly mode. Okay, this is going to make it easier for you to get into the perfect spot for your renderings, and I'll talk about the settings for how to use this. So if you click into your viewport and you hold W, you'll move forward, S will move backwards, A to the left, and D to the right. If you hold down your right mouse button, you'll move your head around, just like this, right? The interesting thing is the keyboard controls will always follow the direction of your head. So watch this. If I hold down my right mouse button and hold W, right? I'm holding W and moving my mouse around, it's always going to follow that, okay? If you ever forget what I'm saying, look right down here. These are all the different hotkeys. So you can even do speed bursts with shift, and you can even slow down with space to a crawl, okay? And what's cool is all those settings correlate right here. You've got speed and height and rotation of the camera. So I recommend you pause for a moment and just get comfortable doing this, especially if this is your first time. If not, we'll move on. So to get the geometry of our project into D5, go right over here to import. This is the direct import method. I mentioned before there's a plugin. This is the other way. This is great if you don't have the application installed. So I'm going to go to import and navigate to wherever you save the file and just hit open. It's going to load into the import container, which you see right here, right? Imported, and this is the %. Again, this is a different panel from the object outliner. People always get them confused and like, oh, where are my files? Well, it's under imported. All you have to do is single click and give it a second. And now it's on your cursor, right? So I'm going to place it, and you're probably wondering, well, that's not really accurate if I just place it, right? So we need to sync our coordinates, and this button right here is sync coordinates. It's going to move the location of our model to match what SketchUp or Rhino or Revit have, okay? So that's what that is. Now I'm just going to fly in. I'm holding down shift with my right mouse button, and this is my project imported into D5. When I go to the object outliner, notice how I can see this here, and I can toggle it on and off. So that's why we did that. So now it's an object we can click on, we can edit the properties of it, we can put it on different layers. That's because this is the inspector tab. Like I was saying earlier, I can make a new layer, click right here, and let's call it architecture. And all I have to do is have the object selected, and I can change it to architecture. Now, when I toggle the layer off, anything that's on that layer will be turned off. So easy way to be super organized. If you have like a bunch of different objects here and it's hard to find objects, you can actually just filter right here. So filter for model, and there's your models right there. All right, cool. So now I want to get into materials because we're recreating the scene, right? So what I always like to do is make sure the sunlight is coming in through the front of the building. It makes it easier to work on materials. So to do that, let's go over to environment right up here. And this is your time of day controller, right? So I can literally type in a time or move this around. But you'll notice I'm not getting enough direct sunlight at the front of my building. So I want to use my north offset tool. And this is going to change where the sun's coming from. Now I can lower that. And now I can see my materials better. Perfect. So let's talk about materials. So I've got a board here with all the photos loaded in, so I can take a look. So we've got a painted metal here. We've got our glass. We've got some concrete steps, some brick on the outside, this nice stone wall, grass, and that's pretty much it for our exterior. So let's knock out those, and then we'll move into the interior. Oh, and don't forget the gravel path, okay? Landscape materials, super important. All of these materials correlate to what they're called in SketchUp. So like gravel is gravel, black metal is black metal. As you can see here, if I were to grab my materials and eyedropper them, see how they're black metal? It's the same exact thing. So that's how that's being brought over. That's how it knows. And this is true for any software, right? It's going to read the material name. And if you ever want to query what a material is, you just hit I on your keyboard, or this guy. That's your material editor. And this is telling you what material name it is and all the different properties for it. So what I really like about D5 is the material asset library. Like 90% of the materials I use comes directly out of the library, and you can import your own custom materials, of course, but I always like using it as a starting point. So let's knock out some of the materials here. Let's go to assets. Here you see we're under material. We've got 2,000 materials to choose from, right? So I want to find a nice metal. I could search for it right here, or I can go to the nicely organized panel here and search right here. This is kind of like a painted iron, right? I kind of like the look of this. So I'm going to click this, and you see how it's highlighting anything that's black. Anything that shares that material color is going to be highlighted. So if I left click this, it's going to apply it, and you can actually see the characteristics of the material coming through. We could see the normal map, right? The normal is what's giving it all these bumps. The reflectivity and all that is coming from the roughness here. So let's talk a little bit about what we're looking at here. There's all these different material templates, right? Custom is like your typical opaque material. There's domains or templates for transparent, liquids, like water, paint, displacement materials, cloth, multimedia, and foliage, right? You are going to live here about like 90% of the time. These are for like very rare instances. You'll use grass to generate grass meshes on a plane, but really you're using this for the most part. And this is going to give you a color overlay, right? That's what this guy is. So I can bring this a little bit here if I want to warm it up, right? It's just adding color. And this is the base color map. This is the actual texture of the map that's being used. So if you had a custom material, right, all you would have to do is click this map and you'd be able to select the texture. So if I click this, that's that brick. So that's how you would bring in your own material, right? So I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that, but that's how you would bring in your own custom assets. So moving on, normal is basically how the bumpy of the surface is, right? You can kind of see it right here. Let me make this 0. You see how there's no bumps? And when I bring it to 1, it's bumpy. That's what that guy's doing. Always make sure you've got a little bit of this, and adds realism. If for some reason you don't have a normal map or any of these channels, you can actually use the AI texture map generator, and this will look at your color map right here and generate all these channels for you. So that's really handy. But any material that's coming out of the D5 library typically has this. But again, if it's a custom material, you're not going to have all these maps. So you can actually just use that, which is amazing. So next one is specular. Think of this as the highlights of the reflections. 0 is nothing, right? Think of it almost like a tire. Basically nothing's being bounced off of it. And 1 is super, super reflective. Depending on the kind of sheen you want, you're going to have to lower this. So if we look at our picture right here, you can see this is kind of like a dull metal. It doesn't have a super high sheen, right? So let's start customizing that. So I'm going to lower that. 0.10 is probably fine. roughness is what's going to control how shiny the surface is. So you see how this is basically a mirror? So that's what that is. If I bring this all the way to 1, that's what's going on there. It's breaking up the reflection because it's super, super rough. And that's all coming from the map here. If I were to delete this map, notice how there's nothing. But if I lower it, I'm gonna get a little bit of a sheen, right? I actually recommend turning that off just because it's making it much softer, right? So next is metallic. The higher this is, the more metallic values will come through. Since this is painted, I'm not really going to increase that. Although it is a metal, it is painted, so, you know, I'll leave it at that. Roughness, I'll probably boost just a little bit to like 0.55. And then here, these are the UVs. So you can kind of see these scratches. This is the stretch. So how big the texture is being stretched or not. Watch this. If I make this 0.5, you see how this is changing here? It looks like this guy, the normal map, is on an individual UV, meaning it's got a separate size from the rest. So if I change this to 10, see how the scratches changed? So you can actually have your maps be different textures, which is really nice and convenient. So if I make this 5, that's changing. So that's what's going on there. I'm gonna leave this back at 1 because I want to see all that detail. Okay. The next is triplanar. This basically just evens out the scale. If you ever deal with like metric or something, sometimes the textures need to be really, really big, like 1000 in order for it to be read properly. This will basically just even it out, put it on world scale. It looks much better. So you can toggle that on and off depending on your project. And then UV randomizer, I'll talk about this when we do other materials, but basically it will randomize all the texture information. So really hard to visualize here. So that's why I'll show it next on the next material. And then round corner, this is how sharp or soft the edges should be. So watch this, I toggle this on. See how it's softening the edge? Every material is a little soft on the corners, so make sure you toggle that on. Okay, so before we move on, let me look at the material, and looks pretty close, right? And that took no time at all. I could go a little darker if I want, and all I would have to do is just go to my base color and just lower that a bit. So now let's talk about the brick here. All I have to do is search for brick right here, and let's look at our example. See if we've got a close up. Yeah, here we go. So we're just looking for a standard red brick. This looks fine. Ideally, we can find something that goes long brick, half brick, long brick. So let's see. It's kind of this one, but this is blue. Wonder if they have another one in red. Let's see. If not, we can tweak the color. Yeah, this works. Old red bricks. All right, let's go with this. So I'm going to click it, and it's a cloud library, so it's going to download. That's what this little green check mark is. And you want to hover over the surface. So I'm going to left click, and that's going to be applied. Perfect. So now I'm going to hit eyedropper just so I can edit things. And again, it's the same settings that we were looking at before, but now we're under the displacement template. So what that means is now I actually have a height controller, so I can choose how far the bricks come out. That's what displacement is. The only issue is you're not going to have triplanar and the world scale feature I was talking about, but yeah, good and bad. So looking at the image we had before, it looks like it's 3 courses, right? 1, 2, 3. And here it looks like we only have got like 2. So all we have to do is just change the stretch to be a little bit smaller. So let's try 0.7. Okay, and now all we have to do is just bring the offset down. And the offset is basically the up down. So it's still a little too big. So let's try this, and we'll turn on around corner. And what we could do with any base color map, you can actually play with the saturation. So if you want it to pop a little bit, just click this little settings button under base color map, and you can saturate it more this way, or desaturate. So I want to give it a little bit more color. So we'll leave it at about 20. That looks good. All right. So let's add a concrete step here, and that is this guy right here. There we go. So just like a rough concrete. So all we have to do is go to the concrete area, clear out any searches, and let's go with rough concrete. This looks nice and worn. I'll zoom in a bit just so we could see the detail. So the UV randomizer, this is what I was talking about before. If you ever see any tiling, this is going to help break it up. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger just so you can see before and after. It's really, really subtle, but it's a nice way to break up textures. So I'll leave that, and I'll put on triplanar and set that to 1. And we'll turn on round corner. All right, then here, this is the edging of our landscaping. I actually want to reuse this material we used earlier, and I can do that by clicking the eyedropper on it, hit duplicate, and now I can paste it. So this is not a direct child of this, meaning if I change any parameter, it's not going to change elsewhere. So you see that? I'm just going to make it a little darker. So it's good for like taking your base texture work and applying it elsewhere. And I'll add a gravel here. This looks pretty good. But you can see that the asset library does a phenomenal job just like taking care of most of our needs. And this also has displacement, so I can increase the height here. And you can actually see the pebbles sticking outwards, which is pretty neat. I want to make them a little bit bigger. So let's try 0.8. So let's go 0.75. All right, awesome. So we've got that. And now let's talk about the glass here. So let's head over to glass, clear out any search. And I always recommend using normal glass as a starting point. I feel like it's got the best settings. It's just simple, clean glass. So I'm going to click this and I'm going to paste here. So now let's talk about what the normal glass settings are. So right over here, we were talking about the material templates before. This is going to use the transparent template. And basically this makes it so you can see through things, right? So normal by default is off because glass isn't really rough, right? We have highlight settings, your specular, right? So how shiny you want your reflections to be. 0.3, totally fine for now. This, I don't really customize until I get all the vegetation in. That way I can see if it's too distracting or not. Thickness, this is if you are modeling single plane versus double plane in your modeling software. So if you do a single plane, this will mimic the correct refraction. So that's handy for that. Roughness, how shiny is your glass, right? 0.01 is typically default. You can definitely increase it if you really want to lose some of those reflections. Okay, and then opacity, how opaque or translucent do you want your glass to be? So I'm going to leave this as is until we get all that stuff layered in. So next thing I want to tackle is the grass here. So if you hit the eyedropper here on the grass, we can switch the template to be grass, and this is actually going to generate grass directly on the surface. So this is really nifty. You've got different types to choose from. So we've got this type, and by default, if you have auto exposure on, it's going to be really hard to gauge if this is the right color. So to just fix that, go over to camera and turn that off. So overall, our scene's like pretty bright, and you can see this is like very saturated grass. So what I recommend doing is lowering the blend amount a bit. Yeah, and this will make it a little bit more realistic looking. And we can always go back and change that later, but you can see it basically turned this 2D surface into 3D grass. So you don't need to like manually brush anything. So that looks great. Let's talk about some of the interior materials, and then we'll do all of our landscaping. So let's go inside. I'm going to bring up my reference photos. So we've got this herringbone brick material here that we can use. So let's search. So I'm going to go back here and let's search for herringbone. Okay, we've got some gray here. That looks good. Red herringbone. This is perfect. So I'm going to grab this. Let's apply it on our floor here. That's great. And now let's just make sure that the direction is going the right way. So we're basically going the short side, this is correct. So let me change the scale. Let's try 1.5. That looks pretty good. All right, that looks awesome. And let's add a little round corner, because why not? All right, perfect. Let's look at some other materials. We've got brick on the center volume. We've got leathers. We've got a rug. And we've got this kind of like plaster on the ceiling. Some woods there. All right, nothing crazy. All right, let's try and find a brick for this. So again, let's search for brick. I want to find something that looks similar. I don't mind this. We could probably get away with this one, and we could desaturate it. So if I click this and apply it here, we can probably desaturate to get in the same family as this. So I'm going to hit I here, and I'm just going to lower the normal a bit, and I'm going to go to the base color map and desaturate. Let's see. Don't know if I love it. I don't love it. Let's try. Should I look for some others? Yeah, let's try this one. Solid red brick wall. Yeah, this is a little bit better. Okay, let's look at the reference. Should be a little bit more brown. This actually looks pretty good. Let's go with this one. Okay, and I'm actually going to switch from displacement to custom. Just because I want the functionality of triplanar. That's going to fix some of the weird stitching issues I was having here. You know, we do lose that one channel, but it's not the end of the world. I'm gonna change this to, whoops, let's try that. I don't love how that's happening. Let me try 3.5. That's better. And now I can darken it over here. There we go. Just so it's in the same vein as that. All right, cool. So then I was talking about leathers. That's these guys right over here. All I'm gonna do is search for leather, right? And again, the D5 library has so many of these, you know, you really don't need to do too much hunting yourself. It's just applying and changing your scale so everything looks right. Let's try 5. Okay, and we'll lower the normal so the leather doesn't stick out that much. And we'll make it slightly shinier. Yep, beautiful. And now we've got this chrome right here. So let's change that. We're gonna go to metal. Clear out your search. Always make sure you clear out your search. And we can use this Eloy. Great. And let's look for a rug. Yeah, this is perfect. But you can see how fast you can be because we have all these amazing materials already built into the library. So we've got that. It's great. Let's take care of this wood right here. So this seems like a bright orange wood. Let's do that. We can make that match. So let's go over to the wood category. Kind of looks like this. Yeah, let's go with this. Let's apply this here. Okay, and I can desaturate this as needed. Let's get that round corner on, fix that up, and desaturate. I can even play with the brightness if I want to darken it. But I think overall, I'm happy with it somewhere around here. And we can add a metal there as well. That was kind of like a brass. Let's go metal, rusty brass, and we apply that. So I'm gonna assume this is probably a little too rusty, right? That roughness map is really scuffing it up. Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's a little too shiny. All right, now these guys, they need color. I could get away with using another metal. Yeah, let's grab this and then we can lower or increase the roughness so it's not so shiny. There we go. And you can see all those scratches. So let's just play with the scale. So we can't really see them. Oops. Let's try 5. And this I'm going to probably put on the randomizer. And this is actually a good view to see what the randomizer is doing. Placing the hexagons and like rotating the pattern to help break up the texture. Let's do that and let's play. And somewhere around there, we might have to turn the randomizer off, lower some of the metalness, and let's increase some of the darkness. Yeah, that's totally fine. And we're going to duplicate here. I'm just going to fill in all these colors so it's all unified. And we missed the dishwasher, so I'll drop that there. Okay, cool. All right, so the main textures are done for in here. You know, you could definitely spend the time and tweak every little thing, but we've got it to a good spot. And now let's see what this guy is. I'll look out here. Ah, it's just a shade. Okay. So what is this shade material right now? Okay, so this is different. So all I'm going to do is search for curtain, and I can grab one of these guys and apply it here. And the nice thing about the curtain materials is they will let some light in, right? It's not 100% opaque. Okay, we've got a nice stone here. If you have something that got imported, you know, texture map wise, this is what I was talking about with the AI tool. So you can actually not only increase the quality of it, but you can also make it seamless. So just to illustrate that, let me hit Ultra HD texture. This is going to upscale if it's needed. So you saw there that it was already high res. Does it need it to? So I can do AI generated map, and it's going to give me a normal map and AO map, which will help fill in some shadow detail here. As you saw here, began to look more realistic. Now we have a normal map, a specular map, and a roughness map, which is controlling the sheen here. AO is controlling all the shadow data. So that actually looks great. So I'm gonna leave that there. Happy with that, but you can see, just added all that detail from something that had no texture map. So that's great. Let's add a concrete to the ceiling. And this is like kind of rough looking. It's kind of like a plaster too. Kind of like that, but also like this. Let's try this. Make it triplanar, and let's make this white. Good. Okay, so I'm gonna brighten this up a bit. Okay, and we're gonna increase the texture size. Yeah, we'll go with like 0.3. Yeah, that looks about right. And I'm just comparing it against these photos right here. You could even go a little warmer, like add a little bit of yellow. So you can switch the color space right here. And now you can start adding some yellow there. So now from far away, we don't have any materials that stick out other than this door. So let's take care of that. We want to make sure nothing's sticking out like a sore thumb. Don't have a photo of what that door material is, but I'm going to match it to this. So I'm just going to go over, duplicate, and place. There you go. I'll do the same thing for the handle. All right. While I'm here, you know, the grass looks a little vibrant, so let's lower that blend amount, and we can even darken it here as well. And now is a good time to save. So hit Control S or go File, Save As. Okay, so let's do that. And I'm going to call this the glass house. All right, great. So now that we've got all that, now we can talk about everything out here. We've got a bunch of trees. We can see this is our site. This is the building, and these are topography lines. If you don't know what these are, think of it as a way to depict the grade. So basically the elevation. If lines are really, really close to each other, that means it's super steep. And that's what's creating this crazy fall off here. You could see how we're like elevated and then everything's kind of below. You can kind of see in some shots this little sloping hill. So we can sculpt that real quick. So in D5 2.9, we got the terrain tool, which is this guy. So if you click this, you can sculpt, you can paint, and you can add different assets. So watch this. If I go over here, I can start painting upwards. So now I gave myself a little hill, right? By just like clicking and painting. So, you know, obviously I don't want it to look like that, so let me just lower that. But that's what these tools are for. So you can go up, you can change the size of your brush, think of it as Photoshop, and how strong it is. So I recommend going with a larger brush that's kind of soft. And what you saw me do here to speed up a bit, I used the scroll wheel up on my mouse, and it's changing my movement speed right here. That's what this guy is right here. So really, really high makes you fly really fast. Really, really low makes you move slow. So it's bound to your scroll wheel if you want to move quickly. So I'm going to lower the size, something like that, and I'm going to click a couple times. I don't recommend holding, just because holding is like super drastic and it makes it go super fast. But you just want a slow, subtle hill like that. Okay. You can also smoothen out any of your painting with this, and you can even flatten it here. All right. So really, we're just gonna be looking out. So what I want to do is, because the world's not, you know, flat, I want to add some detail here. So when we place trees, it's kind of like bumping up and down, and it's not super boring, because you can kind of see that there's like different layers. You see that? It's kind of moving up and down and all that. So to do that, there's a couple of quick, easy ways. Right under here, height map resources, which is, these are little 3D models, or like, actually they're kind of big models of different terrain systems that you can drop directly onto your world. So if I go down and let's look something hilly, or badlands as they call them. Yeah, I'm gonna go with this guy, Hillo 1. And you see how this looks massive, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense, and why am I doing this? If you click this, you can actually lower the height right here. So I just want to add a little bit of detail, right? Just like that, without having to sculpt it all. So let's do really, really subtle. Might be 8, and you can even push down if you want. So do something like that. Then I'm going to hold down Shift and drag in this axis, and I'm going to make a copy. And I'm just going to rotate just for the sake of variety. And I just realized that the Shift trick doesn't work with terrains, which is a shame. So all we have to do is click here and do that. So for any asset, if you hold down Shift and you do that, it will make a copy, but just not those assets for some reason. So I'm just going to move this down a little bit, just so there's some variation. Got that. All right, perfect. The other thing you could also do here, you can actually control the coloring of everything. So if you scroll all the way down, you could change it to be like a forest or rocky or snowland. So depending on your project, you might want to change this. So I'm happy with what this is. I can leave that there. I can even paint additional colors if I want right over here. I can just make a new color checker. So let me say I grab this one. And now if I paint right here, I may have the paintbrush, it'll be this. So that's how you add another channel. You can even play with how the slope gets calculated. So if I click this and I play with the erosion, I can see more of the side of a mountain. So I'll do something like that. And now I need to get trees on here. So we could use the built-in scatter tool, which automatically generates trees, but the problem is it's going to pick up with this whole terrain landscape, and it's probably going to slow down our machines. So what I recommend doing is going over here, and let's grab something that looks like grass, and we're going to paint what we want to be trees. So I'm going to go over here to paint, increase the size, and I'm just going to paint this area. And you can see it's going to start adding that grass color. You might not be able to visualize it too much, so watch this. If I uncheck this and I just change the color to be red, then it'll stick out and you can actually see the work that's being done here. So I'm basically saying anything that's got this red to give me trees. We'll paint over there. And I'm not going to have to go beyond that hill because you probably won't see anything past there. So this should work. So now that I've got that, I can go right over here to add scatter, and I can select the material, which is this red guy right here. See how it's picking that up? If I click this, I hit create. So now that it's calculated the scatter region, you're going to see all these little grids, and this is how I figured out the placement of all the different assets. So what we can do is actually go right over here to nature, click that, and now we can select a bunch of different trees that we want to generate in this area. So I recommend looking at the reference photo and trying to find assets that look close to that. So we want something that's got, you know, a lot of, it's kind of like bushy and round and full. So let's try and find these guys. Yeah, like this is perfect. See if there's any other ones. Yeah, we've got these. Let's grab that, and you can see that it's filling in and distributing those 3 trees that I picked, right? You'll see it's even generating here. And we can talk about how to get rid of that in just a moment. But let's get about 4 different types. If you're feeling really adventurous, we can go with 5. All right, great. So now that that's here, we can actually control which assets get spawned more. So if there's one you like more or you want less of, you can actually drag this out and you can talk and you can explain to D5, oh, I want this to basically generate 24% more than the rest. So that's what these guys are. Or if you want this to spawn less, that's what that's going to do. You see how these are much less frequent? And then collision volume, this is basically how close an object can be spawned. So if you lower this, it'll be a little bit dense or more dense. Talking about density, if you go to distribution, if you want this to be even more dense than what we have here, you can actually just bump this up and you see how much fuller it seems. So this is like super, super crazy. I'm going to make this 5 and that looks pretty full. This right here, I'm going to switch my density to 1 real quick. See how these are generating like in a path? This is going to help break that up, add some noise on where things should spawn. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to play with the density, try calling that 10. So that's going to give us some nice variation. Oh, whoops, and then 15. All right, great. So that looks great. So you'll see right here, we've got trees spawning on our project. So what we want to do is cull out this region. So if you go right over here to effects and hit cull, and you can select this volume right here. And this is going to remove trees from intersecting with that. So you might need to add a bunch of different areas. I'll add this as well. And that should remove the tree. Yep. And I'll add 1 more. So it doesn't collide with the house. Perfect. So that's an easy way to kind of trim all that out. So this tree right here, I think is a little close. So what we can do is detach it. So you can do that by double clicking an asset and now you can detach it and I'll hit done. And now this is its own asset. So you can do that with anything that you want to move. So I'm going to hit done and I'll move this out. Do the same thing with this one. All right, great. So now we have a nice little forest. And again, we're just telling it to grow in the areas of our view. You know, if we were shooting views this way, then probably we'd fill that out. But this is a nice way of handling just what's visible, because you don't want to do too much. It's going to slow your computer down. And while I'm here, I'm going to remove that red tint. Okay, great. So now looking at the project reference photos one more time, we've got some big trees right here, right along our project. So I'm going to drop those in. And a quick, easy way to do that is actually use the path tool directly in D5. So go to tools, path, and I really like these sapien trees. So I'm going to grab these. I'm going to check mark them. So they're part of the container here. You can have up to 6. And I'm going to point and click where I want them to spawn. And they're being spawned along a path, right? So I'm going to hit done. And now I'm just going to increase the number so I have more spawning there. Look at that. Okay. And let me see. Is it spawning on the right? Yeah, there's some. I can actually have this spawn on the hill. So I can edit the path right here and have it do that instead. Yeah, that looks much better. So I can hit done, and that's the cool thing. Like, this is all editable. I can even swap out the assets. I can randomize the direction, their spacing, and their offset, and their sizing. That looks great. I'm gonna hit Control S to save. And we've got this little bench rail thing. So let's just look at the material for that. That looks like a concrete. I'm just gonna grab our steps here and use that. I might darken this a bit just so it doesn't look so white. I'm gonna grab that and duplicate and place here. You know what? Happens to be the same material, so I was right in fixing that. So now that we've got this is all looking good. Let's talk about shooting our own renderings, our first renderings. So let's hit Control S and let's look at some sample photos. So let's try and redo this shot. So it's basically a head-on view. So we want to be somewhere around here. And this is why I'm a big fan of the fly mode. It just makes it so much easier to get into shot. So I'm going to stand somewhere around here. And I'm going to go right over here to Seamless. And I'm going to create a new scene. I'm going to call this Front Exterior. And I'm going to click this so I can edit the camera properties. So here I can play with the exposure. So think of it as like the overall brightness, how much light you're letting into the camera. I'm going to leave this there for now. I'm going to put on 2-point perspective. So all the verticals are perfectly straight. I'm going to make this a 16:9 image and the focal length. So this is basically, you know, if you want a wide angle or close-up shot. I'm a big fan around 25 millimeters. So I'm going to leave that somewhere around here. And clipping plane, if something's in front of you, this will remove it. That's what this is doing. So we'll leave this somewhere around here. I'm going to double click this to update it. So now when I move between the shots, it goes to the new location and it saves all my settings, right? So I'm going to go here to edit my camera and I'm going to turn on depth of field. So I'm going to check mark this. I'm going to set my focus to be the front building because I want this to be in focus and everything else blurred out. I'll set it to about 7. We'll save that there. Okay. So now that that's set up, let's talk about the environment settings. You know, basically setting the light and the time of day. So you could use this dynamic system, which is good. You know, it gives you full customization of like the clouds and everything, how thick they are. Totally up to you, but I am a big fan of using the HDRI tool right here. I find the results to be the most photorealistic. So I switch to midday 2 right over here. Okay. And then I toggle on the sun and I start to rotate this so I get the clouds at an interesting spot, and then I switch the direction of the sun to custom, just so I have full control over the position of the sun. So the azimuth is the rotation and the altitude is the height, right? So I want something that's going to highlight this central area, right? And I think the overall image is a little too dark, so I can boost the sunlight intensity. That's this guy here. I'll leave this around 2, and that looks pretty good. I like the way the light's coming in. I'm going to save this and I'm going to look at this setting right here. So sun disk radius, this is basically how sharp your shadows are. 1 is super, super sharp and 10 is super, super soft. Think of it like an overcast day. 5 is generally a really good spot, especially if you have some sort of clouds in the sky. It's going to help break up the sharpness. So I'm happy with this. In terms of composition, I do want some more interest on the grass. So what I could do is place some trees behind me that will cast a shadow. So I'll show you how to do that. So check this out. If I hit at a camera, I'm now outside of the camera. I can kind of fly around. So I want to grab a tree. So I'm going to go over to assets and I'm going to find a tree that I've been using a lot of. Yeah, we'll grab this and you see how the shadow's going that way. I'm going to add a couple of these. And now let's go back to our camera and you'll see this is like the picture-in-picture mode. So this is where my camera is. And now I can actually, if I pin it, move my trees around so I can see the shadow that it's casting. All right, so that looks great. So I'm going to activate the view by clicking that, and now I see those same shadows. So some things I do want to add, just to help add some realism, is, you know, some debris and some decals in here. So decals, they're basically like stickers that help add another material on top of a surface. So if I go over to Assets and go to Model, scroll down to Decal, I can actually add in, things like leaves. So watch this. Place this here. And I'm going to hit V just to switch my gizmo. And I've got a bunch of leaves here. If I lower the opacity, it's going to lower the intensity of these leaves. So it's not as intense. I'm gonna hit V, hold down Shift, and now I'm making a copy here. I'm just gonna do that kind of around here, just to add some more detail. I can even add some grunge on the building here. That's what this guy is right here. So if I grab rust and place it right here, you see that? Let me hold the V to make it a little bit bigger and scroll down. So this is super, super bright. We're not gonna do that. So we're gonna lower the opacity to be somewhere around there, just to add a little bit of detail there. So I'm just gonna hold down Shift and copy this around. See that? So nice, easy way to add some detail. You can even scatter in more detail. So if I go here, add scatter, select material. If I select this surface, I can add, let's say like weeds, like dandelions, dead grass, things that help break things up. So let's look. Let's go to dead tree. Let's go to fallen leaves. So instead of decaling, you could also do this. You could just grab this and this, and I'll spot it in. See them right there? So you can add singular leaves, but they're not really going to show. You can also add in stones if you want, like little rocks. But for me, I really want to stick to the grass. So I'm just going to search. Let's search for dandelion. See if we can get anything. Weed. Nope. All right, let's look under herb. Yeah. We can add these little guys that'll help break up. Yeah, so you see how they're like super tall and big? This is where I would start lowering the scaling, just so we get a little bit of variation, and then we can lower their spawn ring. See, who else can we add? You can add something like this. We can add some flowers. Again, these guys are too big, right? So let's lower that and lower their scaling. We don't want that many, right? Just a little bit. And then the leaves, we could increase the size just so they stick out a little bit more. But now we've got all this extra detail in here that we didn't have before. That is going to help with the realism. So now we can go back to our project. There we go. Look at that. We've got all that detail. We've got shadows. Now we can go and start thinking about rendering. So right before we do that, I always like to go under Effect. You can play with your exposure controls. If you think it's too dark, you can boost this. Say I set it to 0. That's totally fine. You can play with the contrast if you want. A little bit of contrast is nice. Highlights, basically how bright all the whites should be. You can always right click to cancel out anything. Bloom, you see that right there. Saturation, I'm going to desaturate just a little bit because in the real world, not everything's super saturated. Here is ambient occlusion. This is a good way to add contact shadows. I'm going to increase the radius a bit, and then I'm going to overlay this in here so we get a little bit more shadow baked in there. All right, all that's looking good. So now all we have to do is hit render. So go over here to image mode, select your preset size. We're going to say 2K, and you could render out additional channels if you want. So these are other render channels like material ID and all that. I'm going to leave it how it is, and then I'm going to hit render. Okay, go and save this on your hard drive, and it's going to remember the name of your scene, and it's going to make that the file name. So front exterior is going to be now frontexterior.png. So it should take, probably about a minute depending on your hardware specs. Obviously, the better the PC, the shorter it'll be. This is GPU dependent. And then once this comes out, we can do a quick interior rendering. And that's it for this video, right? So not bad. You can do a lot in just an hour if you know the steps you need to follow to generate nice results. All right, great. It took a minute 28. We'll talk about AI post-processing in just a moment, but let's open up the image and take a look and see what that looks like. There you go. This looks beautiful. Generally whenever I export out rendering, I always give myself a little critique. Some things I would probably tweak, probably the curtain, make that a little bit more transparent, but overall looks stunning. So let's tweak some things and then finish up this mini course. So I'm going to fly over here and let's just fix the curtain. So I'm going to hit eyedropper on it. Okay. And I had the opacity intensity at 1. I'm going to lower this to be like 0.25. So it's not as visible. So now that we're in here, I want to do a nice rendering right out of here. So I'm just going to hit add scene, and it is super dark in here, right? So let's get some sunlight in here. Let's swing over to environment setting, and I'm going to play with the rotation of my sun and everything. So this is actually pretty dramatic, but I want my sun to go the other way. So I'm going to lower the altitude a bit. I try and get, something like this, like super dramatic shadows. Exactly. And we'll say something like that. Okay. I like the look of this. I might bring my camera down just a hair. Yep. And I'm just gonna save that. And I'm going to change my exposure to be probably 0.1. Just add some brightness in here. The other thing I'll do with my camera selected here is I'll set my focus to be the chair. So this is in focus. Otherwise it's gonna be all super blurry, right? So I've got that. That all looks good. I like the way this is being lit. This is great. If I want, I could also add some fog to help hide some of the backdrop. So let's add a little bit of fog. And I'm going to lower the height there. I'll play with the fall off. You can kind of see what's happening there. Make it super, super, super subtle. Okay, let's activate this. And I'm just going to sync that. All right, cool. So yeah, this is a very moody, dramatic angle. Totally fine with that. So now let's render out both views. So to do that, if you hold down Shift and you select both, and then you go to image mode, you can actually do a batch render queue. So if I do this, now I've sent it to my queue here, and now these are two images I need to render. If I select both of them, you can either check mark here or check mark there. I can override any settings. So I'll say they're all 2K, and then I can choose where they go or where they're saved. So let's say V1 is the prefix, and then it'll render out these two shots for me. So I'm gonna do that and hit render. And as you can see, as it's rendering, it's telling you the status as well as the remaining time. So that's pretty nifty. I usually use this if like I've got a bunch of images or like an animation where I just want to set it, go out to lunch or go to sleep, and then I can wake up or come back and have everything done for me. Okay, interior came out. This looks great. I think the specular reflections are a little bright. Yeah, that could easily be lowered. That's no big deal. But overall, this is a great image, great first image as an interior. And we can also probably play with the fog to lessen that. So what's happening is there's a lot of stuff like missing behind us, and that's being reflected here. So that could easily be fixed. I'd recommend probably lowering the specular highlights on the glass themselves. It's looking much better. This is still looking a little bright, so I'm going to play with the opacity some more and lessen that. But let's say you're happy with the renderings and you want to enhance them with AI a bit. If you go to AI post-processing, and if you double click your image, it's going to bring it over here, and you can actually choose to enhance it right here with the enhancer. So if you click that, this is basically how much AI enhancement you want applied. I'll leave it at 0.7 and I'll show you what it'll do. It'll basically make everything look a lot more realistic. It'll help grass and people look better, improve your reflections and everything, especially with the foliage and everything. So I've been doing this to all my images, simple, quick fix to just improve the realism. Okay, cool. So I'll zoom in so you can see what's going on. See what it's doing? It's adding all these nice little details. It's making everything look a little bit more realistic, especially with our grunge here. Look at that. You see how it's added even more? So it just makes everything look so much more realistic. All right, awesome. Yeah, this is in a great spot. So what I recommend for you at this point, generate more views. The only way you're going to get better at this is practicing, generating renderings, seeing what doesn't work, revising, and that's really it. So anyways, hope you enjoyed this mini course. We covered a lot of ground. Excited to see what you create. And as always, if you have any questions, just drop it in the comments. Happy to respond. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.